Simon Bolivar, El Libertador. We all sort of have this picture, right?
Yeah.
The great hero freeing South America, almost mythical.
Yeah, absolutely. But what if that picture, that iconic image, it kind of hides a more, well, a much more complex reality?
Exactly. What if his amazing success wasn't just built on, lofty ideals, but also on some pretty surprising strategies, maybe even unsettling ones?
That's what's so interesting here, I think, peeling back those layers. Because,
Yeah.
yes, he was undeniably huge, transformative, but when you really start digging into how he did it, you get a much more nuanced picture, contradictory even at times.
Right. Because this deep dive, it isn't about just repeating the history book version. We've got some really compelling stuff here that makes you look past the legend to understand this, like the actual nuts and bolts of his revolution. What were those crucial tactics? The ones that were maybe deeply controversial that let one guy liberate so much land. That's really what we want to explore.
And, to really get those tactics, you have to start with the man himself. Believer. He wasn't, like, born a revolutionary figure.
No.
His early life, wealthy Creole family in Venezuela, born 1783.
That gave him privilege, sure, but it also put him right there, seeing the growing unhappiness with Spanish rule.
Okay, so when you say Creole here, for listeners.
Right, good point. We mean someone of European descent, but born in the Americas. They often had money, social standing, but crucially, they were shut out of the very top jobs by the Spanish colonial system.
Gotcha. So a comfortable life, but still limited by the system.
Yeah.
And then he goes to Europe, gets exposed to the Enlightenment. That must have been huge for him.
Oh, absolutely huge. Reading thinkers like Rousseau, Locke, all about popular sovereignty, natural rights. It gave him the intellectual framework for revolution, didn't it?
Yeah.
And then seeing Napoleon in Paris, witnessing that kind of radical change driven by one person's will, plus the personal stuff, losing his parents young.
Yeah.
It seems like all that just fueled his convictions, made him almost unstoppable.
So it's a real journey then, from maybe just wanting more, say, like other Creoles, to this massive vision. A united, powerful South America. That's quite a shift.
A huge shift. And that kind of ambition needed more than just ideas. It needed a really specific, often innovative way of fighting.
Against the Spanish Empire.
Yeah.
Right. Not exactly pushovers.
And not at all. He couldn't just raise a bigger army.
Yeah.
So this is where his genius for guerrilla warfare really shines.
Using the Andes.
Exactly. Using the terrain, hiding, disrupting supply lines, quick ambushes, using local knowledge. It basically canceled out Spain's advantage in numbers and traditional military power.
It sounds like the classic underdog playbook, but on a massive scale. He mastered it. But it wasn't just fighting, was it? He also had this knack for making alliances, even if it was tricky.
Oh, remarkably so. And sometimes ruthlessly so. As you say, he knew a divided movement would just get crushed. So his ability to bring together different local leaders, even guys who hated each other or had totally different goals.
That was amazing.
How did he do that? Promises. A mix of things. Diplomacy, sure. Strategic marriages sometimes. And definitely, crucially, promises of autonomy for the regions later on.
But the sources we're looking at suggest these weren't exactly stable partnerships. They call them fragile and self-serving. Sounds like walking a tightrope.
It absolutely was. How did he keep them together? Well, take someone like José Antonio Páez in Venezuela. Bolívar basically said, okay, you run things here, just give me your troops. He recognized Páez's power.
Even if their long-term goals maybe didn't align.
Exactly. They were tactical deals, alliances of necessity. Bolívar made calculated compromises for immediate military wins, figuring he'd sort out the politics later.
And sometimes that meant turning on people. The sources mentioned betrayal. San Martin, for example.
Yes, that's a really complex one. His relationship with José de San Martin, their approaches, their ambitions, they clashed. And their eventual split, you could argue, it weakened the overall revolutionary cause in the long run. Trust was definitely impacted.
Okay, so we've got the unconventional fighting, these flexible alliances. But Bolívar also seemed to get that this was a mental game too, right? Psychology mattered.
Oh, hugely. He was a master of what we'd call psychological warfare. Propaganda. He really understood symbols, image.
El Libertador.
Precisely. That wasn't just a nickname someone gave him. It was a brand. Carefully built, carefully spread to inspire people, make them loyal.
He was the revolution, in a way. And how he framed it, not just about land or politics, but this like divine mission, a moral fight for the future of Latin Americans. That's powerful stuff.
Incredibly powerful. His speeches, his writings, they're filled with these soaring ideals, a unified, just prosperous South America, it gave people something huge to believe in, something worth dying for.
Across different classes, too, presumably.
Yes, it tapped into really deep hopes. The big challenge, though, was making those beautiful words into, well, into actual working governments.
Which leads us to the harder parts, because the sources don't shy away from it. There's a darker side here. Terror, ruthlessness.
Yeah, and this is something we have to confront, even if it's uncomfortable. Bolívar could be incredibly harsh when he felt he needed to be, to solidify control, crush opposition.
Like the executions in Bogota.
Exactly. After retaking the city in 1816, the mass executions of royalist soldiers, even sympathizers, it's a stark example of his willingness to use extreme force against perceived enemies.
Chilling. And not just soldiers, right? The sources mention scorched earth tactics, burning villages.
Yes, in places like Peru, Colombia, villages suspected of helping the Spanish, that kind of brutality feels totally opposed to the liberator image, doesn't it?
It really does. How did he justify that?
The justification usually was that it was a necessary evil, regrettable, but needed for the ultimate victory for the future republic. But the sources also hint that these very tactics often turned local people against him, so distrust.
Which perhaps connects to his biggest dream, this united Latin America, Gran Colombia, Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, all one big nation, kind of like the U.S.
It was an incredibly bold vision, yeah, inspired by the Enlightenment, wanting to create this powerful bloc against Europe. But he maybe didn't fully grasp how strong the regional loyalties were.
People didn't just want freedom from Spain, they wanted their own freedom, not just swapping one master for another, even a revolutionary one.
Pretty much. Local leaders who'd fought for independence weren't eager to just hand over power to a central figure, even Bolívar. And his leadership style didn't always help.
How so?
Well, the sources suggest he became increasingly authoritarian. He tried to impose his vision rather than building consensus, which, ironically, probably fueled the very divisions he wanted to overcome.
So his attempts to hold it all together actually helped pull it apart.
You could definitely argue that. His reliance on a tight inner circle, his impatience with dissent, it all contributed. By 1830, Venezuela and Ecuador had split off. The dream of unity just fractured.
And all that pressure, the fighting, the politics, seeing his big dream crumble, it must have taken a huge personal toll. The sources talk about insecurities, paranoia later on.
Yes, it seems the relentless strain really affected him psychologically. He became more secretive, more suspicious, even of close allies. It suggests a man just worn down by it all, burdened by the weight of it, maybe haunted by some of the choices he'd made.
It makes the end of his story feel almost tragic. He resigns in 1830, forced out, feeling bitter like a failure. This guy who freed nations ends up disillusioned, isolated.
It's incredibly poignant, and it leaves us with this legacy that people still argue about today, don't they?
Totally. Hero or tyrant?
Right. Was he the visionary liberator whose dream of unity still inspires? Or was he ruthless, authoritarian, someone whose own flaws helped create instability in the nations he founded?
And the answer is probably complicated. Somewhere in between.
I think that's usually the case with figures like this. You can't deny his role in independence, the power of his vision, but you also can't ignore the brutality, the manipulation, the authoritarian streak that undermined his own goals.
The cost of liberation was immense.
Yeah.
For everyone involved, including Bolívar himself.
Absolutely. His story is just such a powerful reminder that revolutions are messy. Achieving noble goals often involves, morally gray choices. And those choices have long-lasting consequences.
So as you, our listener, think about Bolívar, maybe ask yourself this. Can a leader really build lasting unity using methods that are, by their nature, divisive? Or maybe how do we reconcile these heroic stories of liberation with the often brutal reality of how it happened?
Yeah, and how did those contradictions shape Latin America afterwards? It's a legacy that's so much more complex than just the statue in the town square. It really forces you to look deeper.